All right, Mountaineer Nation, thanks for tuning in to another edition of Fox on West Virginia Mountaineer Sports. Getting back to my roots, really, this was my idea and inspiration for creating the channel, is I thought that I had so many random West Virginia thoughts while driving that I needed to just record them, even if it meant while I was recording while driving. Well, I'm parked, thankfully. But I just had to come on here before we start the workday here and give my 2 cents on West Virginia baseball and head coach Steve Sabins making the decision to turn to Ian Korn into the starting rotation, going to start tonight's contest Thursday against TCU at home. Dawson Montesa moved out of the starting rotation. Max Yell's going to start Friday night's game. Chance and Cole's going to start Saturday afternoon's game. And I think this is the right decision. I think this was something that Coach Sabins really wanted to do, or, I talked about this a little over a month or so ago, that just the inefficiencies of Dawson Montesa on the mound and how much better Ian Korn was improving, especially throughout the month of March, that Korn warranted the opportunity. And then when Max Yell went down with the injury in the Houston series, kind of turned things on its head a little bit. West Virginia really couldn't experiment there in mid-April with easier opponents in Houston and Penn State to try and kind of tinker around with the rotation. Of course, we saw some movement between Yell being moved around on different dates and stuff, but for the most part, for most of this season, it's been Dawson Montesa, Chance and Cole, and Max Yell starting. So to go to Korn, this is a big decision. This is a big move. It's the last series of the regular season. West Virginia is going to participate in the Big 12 tournament next week, probably anywhere within the top 4 seeds, hopefully number 1. So as West Virginia tries to compete for a regular season title once again in back-to-back years, West Virginia's got to figure this out of who are its top 3 starting pitchers. And for right now, that's my money. When you compare Korn versus Monteza, the last 4 appearances, by the numbers, make a lot of sense. Here's why this decision's being made. 17 and a third innings pitched, 4 earned runs, 11 hits, just 2 walks. And when I broke it down pitches per inning, counting up how many number of pitches Korn's thrown divided by innings pitched, he's right at a perfect 14 pitches per inning. Growing up, most of my life playing baseball, I always kept it in the back of my mind, if you had somewhere around a 100 pitch count, now I know that's been lowered over the years. It seems like guys are being told to throw as hard as they can for as long as they can, and whenever they start to show any sort of fatigue, they'll get pulled. So then sometimes they get pulled much less than 100 pitches, at least from a major league perspective. But I always thought to myself, if I could stick to around 15 pitches per inning, you don't get into too many deep counts, you don't get crushed by walks, that's when you're most efficient. And Korn's definitely showing so by the numbers. On the opposite side for Monteza, he's only at 15 and 2/3 innings pitched, 9 earned runs, 12 hits, 14 walks, and a hit batsman in those last 4 appearances. His pitches per inning are now up to 20. So you got to, as we saw in the Kansas series last weekend, the teams who are able to take advantage of other teams' mistakes, it's not always just so much about what you do. It's causing your opponent to have unforced errors. And Kansas got killed by unforced errors, namely to the tune of walks last weekend, especially in that Sunday contest. West Virginia just took complete advantage of them when it seemed like Kansas kept the game pretty close in the early innings. So Korn being most efficient, Cole and Yale have been your top 2 pitchers on your team in the conference. It makes total sense to keep them. So what do you really do with Monteza here from this point? I think this is a very interesting question. This is now the logical question that's pitched. All right, what do you do with him now if you're not using him out of the starting rotation? And so much of this now from this point moving forward for the season is going to come down to 2 to 3 game series. So you have to find your top three guys, and then build out your bullpen. And you're going to use a lot of relievers. As we saw in that regional last year against Clemson, it was and even the super regionals against LSU, it was guys kind of coming out of the woodwork like a Ben McDougal, who really made a name for themselves. So this is not the end by any stretch of the imagination for Dawson Montesa, not by a long shot. I don't think that his season's over by any means, that he now he's got to be repurposed. And as I was looking ahead, already kind of taking some notes down of what West Virginia is looking for in its roster for next year, getting a couple of recruits just recently, one transfer from Marietta College, another from the JUCO level, so I can't wait to talk about that this summer, is whenever the transfer portal opens up and West Virginia reloads. I sometimes forget that Monteza is just a junior, so that he will have the opportunity to come back next year, solidify one of those top three starting rotation spots, and if the NCAA institutes this 5 seasons in 5 years rule, then Monteza is going to get to pitch another season on top of that. So this is a guy that you want to keep engaged within this program. This isn't the end. So I'm wondering if perhaps he moves into what Korn was doing, being your long relief guy. He could certainly do that. Although the one guy, and this is, again, kind of a Jekyll and Hyde player who, thankfully, we saw one of the best appearances from him this past weekend was Reese Bassinger. Reese Bassinger was excellent on Sunday at Kansas, pitching 5 innings, no runs allowed, just 2 hits, 4 strikeouts, and a walk. So I think that gave Sabins a little bit of confidence to go with this move, thinking that, if Monteza isn't suited for even a long relief role, who's going to fill that spot by Korn, that if you pull a Chance and Cole on Sunday after 5 innings, who are you going to turn to? So if it's not going to be Monteza in a straight swap for Korn, is it Reese Bassinger? I think he feels really good about where Reese Bassinger is right now and some of the others that he has potentially in long relief options. The one that I'm really looking toward is David Perez. Looked it up and I thought, we just haven't heard from him for a while, and it's true. Hasn't pitched since April 25th at Cincinnati. He was not nearly as effective in the month of April as he was in the month of March. And obviously, hotter competition against more Power 4 opponents than that West Virginia was playing in the month of March. But it was really going back to that ASU game on March 29th. He went 3 2/3 innings, pitched the most pitches that he's thrown all season long, gave up 4 earned runs in that one. And he wasn't really the same in April. And then getting up to that Cincinnati game, he gave up multiple earned runs. So it just goes to show that I think, a true freshman pitching in a regional, pitching in a super regional, if West Virginia's blessed enough to get there, maybe you go with the older, more veteran guy who's been in a starting position this year in Monteza, and going with him out of the closer role. Sabins has said before that kind of a true closer is a luxury item for a lot of programs out there. So it gives West Virginia options. I think options are a beautiful thing. West Virginia has them now with Yale, Chance and Cole, the best 2 pitchers in the Big 12. Now moving Korn into that starting role. You can move Monteza into the long relief role or a high leverage closer type of role. David Hagan, the West Virginia's midweek starter for most of the season, should be a guy that West Virginia can turn to as kind of a middle innings eater if a game's kind of either gotten away for West Virginia or shorter start by one of their starters, and you got to have a guy who can eat innings. And your high leverage guys now down the stretch being Carson Estrich, Reese Bassinger, David Perez, or move Monteza into that role. And then some other guys kind of on the outside looking in that I feel confident about. Ben McDougal, especially after what he did in last year's postseason, although I know this has been an injury-plagued season, not what he had hoped for a senior year. And then a guy kind of right on the outside looking in that West Virginia might turn to as well is Josh Suriago. I haven't seen him, hasn't been called upon. I mean, that's a good thing when you don't have to turn to your relievers because your starters are so good and go deep into games that you don't have to use your relief pitching. That's always a good thing. So right there, 3 starters, 2 long relief guys, 3 high leverage back end bullpen guys, and 2 guys that you feel, okay, in a pinch, maybe you could turn to. That's pretty good. That's what makes a top 10 team in the country. That's what makes a team that's contending for conference championship, right? Both regular season and maybe in the Big 12 tournament. And this is a really great place to be in. Enjoy the ride, Mountaineer Nation. I'm going to be in Morgantown at Kendrick Family Ballpark tomorrow night, Friday night's game. Got to see my man Maxiel. Got to see at least one game in person. At the stadium, having missed out on the game that was supposed to be during the West Virginia Spring Football Festival. So hope to see you there at the ballpark, and can't wait to cheer on those Mountaineers. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it. And I'll be back after we get through this series against TCU, see where West Virginia falls for the Big 12 tournament, and then talk about the postseason. So hail West Virginia. Let's go.